This issue of Spacecraft Guide is going to be part of a special three-part on the Apollo mission. And that is due to the fact that this month, July, we will be celebrating the landing on the moon. In this issue of Spacecraft Guide, we are going to go over what the scientists discovered from the Apollo program and the devices that were used to find these discoveries. The first instrument was the Lunar Surface Magnetometer. Now, it was put on the moon to measure the magnetic field. What they found is there is a magnetic field, but it's about 350 times weaker than on Earth. It's also susceptible to solar winds. This means a common compass won't work on the moon. They also helped in the discovery that the moon has iron in its core, but is much smaller than on Earth. The next instrument is the Ion Experiment, which consisted of the Supra Thermal Ion Detector and Cold Cathode Ion Gauge. The Supra Thermal Ion Detector equipment measured positive and negative ions numbers, density, velocity, and relative energy on the moon's surface. What was discovered was the positive ions were only on the side of the moon that they were experimenting, because they were the positive ions and they are larger and they're not affected by the Earth's magnetic field that sometimes stretches out and encompasses the moon. The CCIG, or the Cold Cathode Ion Gauge, measured the ion pressure in the atmosphere on the surface of the moon. Now, they found that the pressure of the ions was 10 to the minus torr on the moon. In comparison, on Earth, the measurement is around 760 torr. The final experiment we're going to talk about is the passive seismic experiment. Well, that measured the seismic activity on the moon, and they found that the seismic activity increased when the moon was closest to the Earth. Now, this instrument was used to determine the interior of the moon by linking all of the Apollo's passive seismic experiments information together, and then crashing lunar modules and boosters into the surface of the moon, and then measuring the activity when that happened. From this, they discovered more mass is gathered on the near side of the moon that we see all the time. Tidal lock was another way, or was why we see only one side of the moon, and having all that mass on one side helped lock the moon into view for us. That's the image that we see all the time. Another thing they found out is that the moon rings like a bell. When they were crashing the lunar modules and the boosters into the surface of the moon vibrated for 50 minutes. And the reason why it did is because there's no water, and because there's no water, it's extremely dry on the moon, since there's no water or any other liquids. So that is why the moon rings like a bell when it is struck.